Hey guys, Steve here. Before we start today's episode, we want to give you a clear heads up about what you're stepping into. This conversation includes adult situations, emotionally heavy subject matter, and moments that may be triggering or traumatic for some listeners or viewers. Topics we touched on include difficult personal experiences, distressing events, and mature themes that aren't suitable for all audiences. Please take a moment to check in with yourselves. I know that certain subjects can be hard or to bring up past trauma. You may want to proceed with caution, listen in a safe place, or choose to skip this episode entirely. Your mental and emotional well being is more important than any show. We encourage you to take breaks if you need them, reach out to someone you trust if anything comes up, and prioritize your own comfort above all else. Thank you and take care of yourselves. And thank you for joining us in another episode of Dads with Nerdy Ambitions. Welcome to Dads with Nerdy Ambitions. I'm your host, Steve Pugh. My co-hosts are not here tonight. Sam is, I think he's out doing D&D. He couldn't be here, which is, I'm going to give him so much help for this because he is like my charming British dude. And then my typical co-host, Kevin Zerbobbins, is not here because he's dealing with, he had something he had to go take care of. So I'm giving them both heck that they are missing out on one of the most funnest conversations that we get to have because it is plugging at our childhood here. It is plugging at these 90s nostalgia. I have the honor of having one of the most pinnacle people in, I believe, in the horror community as well as my 90s nostalgia right here. Like legitimately. I get to have Alan Katz on the show. You are a writer, you are a producer, you are do creative voices. You are behind one of the creative voices behind, or the creators of Tales of the
The
Crypt.
Crypt.
You
Yeah,
made
well,
and helped make that.
I wrote and produced Tales from the Crypt. I co-created the Crypt Keeper, and I'll explain that process.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'll
you.
tell you what exactly do I mean by I co-created the Crypt Keeper.
Yeah. So we'll go right
Yeah,
into
yeah,
this.
we will get to that, but to start there would be nuts. So we ain't gonna start there.
Yeah. So where I really like to go with
Yeah, where do you want where do you want to start this madness?
I so I because we were both nerdy and we were both connoisseurs of nerd culture. As you can see, like I know you were admiring my wall of
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
nerdom back there. I'm a connoisseur. I really am a connoisseur of
Your
this.
collection
Uh
of stuff.
I've got aliens, I've got LARPing, I've got CFX masks, I've got D&D. You know, you take a flavor and then probably have it back there. So like all good true nerd cultures here, there has to be a proper origin story. Um, so what is yours, sir? How did you get into this? You know, what was the fandom that enlightened you into the all this?
I I I grew up a movie buff,
Mhm.
and I, but I've been a professional writer since I was 16.
Okay.
I've to me, I've always taken writing for granted. When I went to college, I was a drama major. I wanted to be an actor. I was a drama major at Vassar in Poughkeepsie, New York, where Meryl Streep went. After Vassar, I did one audition. I was quite
Mhm.
horrible, actually. And I walked out of that and I said to myself, what kind of an idiot makes a living this way? I'm going to just be a writer instead, bigger idiot. And I said to myself, I swore to myself, and I'm not going to act again until someone asks me nicely, which I have kept to the couple of times I've acted since, is because director friends have asked me nicely, hey, would you do this little role for me? I don't know. Oh, come on. Okay. Uh, the director Mick Garris asked me very nicely to be in an episode of Tales from the Crypt, and I
Mm.
said yes. He asked me very nicely because he knew I was angry at him because of a casting choice he made without asking me first, because it was a script I wrote and I was producing. All right, we'll do the story a little bit at a line. Mick, a wonderful person, and he likes stunt casting, and often that works out really really well. It really freshens things.
Mm.
I had written an episode called Whirlpool, which was kind of a very circular story that kept repeating itself. It was about a comic book like Tales from the Crypt, and it took place in the offices, and it was about a bunch of comic book writers in the 50s. And suddenly I'm told that they've already cast Rita Rudner and Richard Lewis, but Rita Rudner is to be the comic book writer. And that made zero sense to me whatsoever. Interesting stunt casting, but my problem was, all right, I don't have a problem with, all right, casting Rita as this comic book writer, but nobody references the fact that she's female in the script. Now, if we're going to shoot this as a period piece, which we did, and if nobody is remarking about the fact that one of the people in it is not historically accurate, I don't know. It makes the world in which we're dealing with kind of bullshitty, and I disagreed with it, and I was quite angry about it, especially because you didn't ask me, and my partner Gil didn't ask me either. He was the producer of the show, but Mick approached me the next day and said, "Hey, there's the part of Iggy. How about if you play that?" And just like that, I said, "Okay, I forgive you." All right. So I was a writer, and I was a New Yorker, and I was writing and producing training films and little industrial things and promotional things. And I had a friend from school named Carol Yumkus, and she had gone out to LA and she'd become an agent, a literary agent at William Morris in the film department. And she knew that I was now writing again, and she said, "Hey, you should try writing a screenplay." So I wrote a screenplay called Down to Earth, and Carol read it and she said, "This is quite good. You should come out and meet and greet people." So I had another pitch for an idea. She said, "Yeah, come up with a pitch, and if they like it, they'll pay you to write it." Well, that sounds cool. So in June of 1985, I flew from New York to Los Angeles for a week of meet and greet. Now, I was a burgeoning New Yorker, and to me, Los Angeles was the stupidest fucking place on the planet. The land of the avocado head. I'd been there once when I was 14. It had made no real impression upon me. And yet, oh gosh, the people were so nice. And this was 40 years ago. It was a lot less crowded than it is today. June on the East Coast. Hey, you know what it's like in New York in June. It's hot, it's humid, every place smells like piss. Not the case at all in Los Angeles. Driving around in your nice car in the sunshine with the top down. It was fantastic. The meetings, everyone was incredibly nice. Copious amounts of smoke getting blown up my ass. Highly recommended. One night, my agent took me to a movie premiere, St. Elmo's Fire. William Morris represented them and represented the movie. And so this was a backstage view of this. And it was intoxicating. The next morning, I didn't have any meetings at the party. Somebody said, "Hey, you should take a drive to Topanga Canyon," which is part of Los Angeles, within the city limits. And so I did that the next morning. And as I said, it's this beautiful, much more built up than it was 40 years ago. But as you drive from the 101, the freeway, through the Santa Monica Mountains, as they plunge into the Pacific Ocean at the Pacific Coast Highway, by the time I got to the water, fuck New York. I had been completely seduced by the beast. And the very next month, I moved out to Los Angeles. Now, among the first people that I met that week, that was meeting producers and talking about the script I'd written and the one that I wanted to pitch. So among the people that I met that first week in Los Angeles was a producer named Gil Anthony. Gil, no, I'm not a horror guy. I comedy. The scripts I wrote are all comedies, and Gil also was comedy. He came out of theater in New York, but he trained as an accountant. And so he understood that if you have $1 to make your movie or TV show, don't spend $1, you haven't got it. If you can make your TV show or movie for 99 cents or 98 cents and make it still look like that dollar, that's really good. Better yet, if you can do it for 97 cents and make that thing look like $1 or $2, now you're onto something. Gil understood that the creative process is really just problem solving. And his answer to the problem solving wasn't throw more money at it, it was throw more creativity at it, which was exactly the way that I approached the problem solving problem of the creative process. And so we bonded, and like I said, we became best friends and writing partners. We wrote a bunch of scripts. Gil produced a show called Freddy's Nightmares, the Nightmare on Elm Street TV series. He directed a couple of episodes, and we wrote episodes of that. Like I said, Gil is a very strong producer. HBO discovered him. They were doing a show called The Hitchhiker, and Gil produced that for them up in Canada. So they knew that Gil was a good, reliable producer. A little while after that, they had an expensive project with a lot of big names that was in the shitter it was called Vietnam War Stories. It was over budget, it was over schedule. They sent Gil to Savannah, Georgia, where it was shooting to try to wrestle it back under control, and he did. He got the budget, the schedule, all working again, and brought it in, and it won awards. And so
Nice.
HBO thought very highly of Gil, as they should. And a little while later, they had another high visibility project, big names attached to it, that was having a problem. And that project was called Tales from the Crypt. And HBO wanted Gil to come in and take it over. And because I was Gil's writing partner, I went into the project with him. Now, when Tales from the Crypt was created, the TV show, in the late 80s, in 1989 is when it went on the air, HBO was still doing movies mostly. They were just dipping their toe into original programming, a show called Dream On, another one called First and 10. But these are basically just single camera shows with tits and the word fuck. If you took out tits and fuck, basically just network ready single camera shows. There was nothing big about them. Then these four mega Hollywood producers, Joel Silver. Do you know who Joel is?
I don't know that one name off the top of my head.
I'll because you're going to hear Joel's name a lot. So, all right, Joel Silver, the Lethal Weapon franchise.
Oh, yes.
Those movies, that's Joel Silver. The Matrix movies, that's Joel Silver. The Predator movies, that's Joel Silver. Big action movies, that's Joel Silver. He's just one of the biggest producers in all of he's one of the guys. Richard Donner is a director and a producer. He directed Superman with Christopher Reeve, little movie called The Omen. Huge movies. Walter Hill, the director of movies like 48 Hours and lots of great movies. And of course, Robert Zemeckis was my other boss. Bob Zemeckis, Forrest Gump, Castaway, Back to the Future. These were four of the biggest names in the business action movies. They had this passion project that they loved from their boyhoods, a comic book series called Tales from the Crypt. And they approached HBO. They said, we want to take this thing that we love from our boyhood and give it a feature film sized presentation on your little TV box. HBO jumped up and down and said, and so that's what they did. They went right to work, writing scripts and getting ready to make this thing. These were not guys in the TV business. There are ways to make TV shows and lots of ways not to make TV shows. They didn't do any of the things that you normally do to make a TV show, which is why they ultimately got into trouble. Among the things they did not do, they did not go into any kind of development process. Now, to translate a franchise from one medium, let's say comic books, to another franchise, let's say TV, it doesn't happen by itself. There's a lot of work involved in taking all the elements, the franchise elements from the Tales from the Crypt, Crypt of Doom, the Crypt of Terror, all the different DC titles that we were using, and to put them into a TV show, there's a lot of stuff that has to happen, but there was nobody overseeing that, and that caught up with them over the course of time. One of the other things that they didn't do, which they should have, they should have gotten what's called a deficit partner. Now, the way that TV shows are made and how they get financed, when a network plays a show, whether it's NBC or HBO or Netflix, in essence, every time they play it, they pay what's called a license fee to the people who made it. But the license fee for the first time, the second time, the third, or the fourth time, that is never going to pay for the cost of production. It's going to take many repeated viewings, ideally over the course of syndication, before a show becomes suddenly incredibly profitable. And so whatever the license fee that's being paid for production, that's not going to cost for that's not going to pay for the production. You need a deficit partner, but the Crypt partners never got a deficit partner. And so the first season was simple and basic. It was the first 3 episodes, which Bob's all through the night, Dick Donner's Dig This Cat, He's Real Gone, and Walter Hill's The Man Who Was Death. These are 3 amazing episodes. The back 3 less, so, and then HBO ordered a second season of 18 episodes to be followed by a third season of 13 episodes. And everybody went to work. Now, as I said, nobody was minding the bank. And so they were spending money and HBO was cash flowing it. The night before the season 2 wrap party, HBO handed the executive producers a financial that said, guys, you're $1 million cash in the hole. They promptly canceled the wrap party, fired everybody, got out their checkbooks, and paid HBO the $1 million they owed them, because if they didn't pay the $1 million, wasn't going to be any season 3, and there was lots of money for the executive producers in season 3, and they could take the $1 million out of the budget, which is exactly what they did. So HBO needed a new producer for the show. They wanted Gil because he was responsible, and because I was Gil's writing partner. Gil said, I want Alan to be the story editor. There had never been a story editor, someone to oversee, in particular, the transfer of all the franchise elements from that medium into this medium. All right. I had 2 jobs on Tales from the Crypt. One was, as I said, overseeing the franchise and making sure that everything from the comic books ended up, I don't mean the words, I meant the elements, the visual, the tone, because it wasn't just horror. The EC world, which I loved, and getting that gig was, for me, it was, how did the stars line up to put me there? I grew up reading Tales from the Crypt under the covers. I was a Mad magazine aficionado from the time I was a little kid. The possibility of doing Tales from the Crypt was incredibly enthralling to me. To actually have gotten the gig, well, every script had to go through me as the story editor that first year before I became a full-on producer. I was the last person to type every single script. So before it went to the department heads for production, before it went to casting, every script went through me. My other job was writing Crypt Keeper segments. Now, just as they had never put the show, never been any development process for the show, the same thing happened with the Crypt Keeper. The Crypt Keeper in the comic books is an old white guy with stringy hair. The executive producers wanted their own Crypt Keeper, and one day at a storage place, our executive producer, Joel Silver, bumped into, the storage locker across the hallway was owned by a special effects maestro named Kevin Yeager. And among other things, Kevin created the Crypt Keeper puppet. He created Chucky and many other incredible monsters that you've seen and loved. When Joel saw what was inside Kevin's locker, he went crazy. He went, "Oh my God, you got to make a Crypt Keeper for me." How Joel talks. And Kevin went to work and created the Crypt Keeper puppet. And then Kevin found John Kassir, who became the voice of the puppet. So they had a magnificent puppet. And the Crypt Keeper is actually 6 puppeteers, not one puppet. Takes 6 different puppeteers to make the Crypt Keeper come to life. We'll get to that. But just as they never developed the show, got a deficit partner, they never developed the Crypt Keeper. They never asked the question, who is he? Whoever wrote the script would throw a couple lines at the Crypt Keeper, and that would be it for the most part. Well, I don't know how you write for a character who doesn't exist. So just to do my damn job, I had to create a character for him. Now, I grew up loving old movies. I loved the Marx Brothers. And so I kind of saw an opportunity for the Crypt Keeper to become my little Groucho. And having to fill him with a personality and being a writer and therefore somewhat lazy, I reached for the closest personality at hand, which was mine. And that's what I stuffed into the Crypt Keeper. And so he looks like Kevin's puppet. He sounds like John's voice, but every thought in his head, every word that came out of his animatronic mouth was me. During that 3rd season, which was supposed to be the last season of Tales from the Crypt, something happened. In part, it was, I think, the reinvigoration of the franchise because someone was suddenly paying attention to all the things that really made the executive producers want to make it as a TV series. So I just went back to that and really drove that hard. That made a difference. Gil and I went back to the idea of it's supposed to be movies on TV shows. Let's get movie stars. Let's get the biggest names we can get on our show. And we did. Yeah. The biggest thing that happened, it turns out, and a lot of that is in retrospect and looking at what happened, it was giving the Crypt Keeper an inner life that changed him from the puppet named the Crypt Keeper into the Crypt Keeper, the franchise character of that show, who at the end of the day became more important to the franchise than the episodes themselves. The Crypt Keeper is what people think about when they think about Tales from the Crypt.
Absolutely.
They don't think about the episodes. There's nothing wrong with the episodes. I'm biased, but the Crypt Keeper became, well, he took on a life of his own. Now, I can tell you that working on Tales from the Crypt, everyone who worked on that show, looking back at toward the end of their careers, everyone would tell you that was one of the most amazing shows they got to work on. It really was creatively and challenging, constantly challenging, because we didn't have any money. HBO didn't spend money at that particular point on TV shows. And when we went aboard in the 3rd season, hey, don't forget, whatever our budget was, subtract $1 million that went into the partners' pockets to pay for the overage from the previous season. So part of my budget went to pay for season 2's bullshit. So we walked in the door with, one financial hand tied behind our back. We had an amazing crew. Very, very key to it was our set designer, a guy named Greg Melton. Greg had worked on Freddy's Nightmares with Gil, and Greg's ability, and again, these are anthologies. These are not a regular TV show. You have the luxury of standing sets that you'll use again and again and again, the occasional new set here and there. When you do an anthology, it's a whole new world every single week. And that's not easy to pull off if you're doing 20 episodes, 13 episodes. That's a grind. But Greg very cleverly figured out a way to do it and deliver incredible production value for the money. A true artist. Greg, among the other projects that he went on to do after Crypt, he was the original production designer on Walking Dead. So we had an amazing creative team. Over the 5 seasons and the 70 some odd episodes that I wrote and produced or oversaw, I got a total of 3 notes from HBO. That was incredible creative freedom.
as someone who's, I've talked to a lot of people out in Hollywood, and I have some really good friends who are voice actors and everything. Uh, that's impressive that you only got three notes
It was
completely.
it was terrific. It really was an incredible creative experience. Now, our executive producers, well, pleasure to work with always. I had my very first season on the show, which was supposed to be the last season, don't forget. And so what was supposed to be the last episode, an episode called Yellow, that Bob Zemeckis directed and Kirk Douglas stars in, with Dan Aykroyd, Lance Hendrickson, really a cool cast. It was supposed to be the last episode, but because we had turned the show's fortunes around mid-season, HBO said, we're going to order more episodes. We're going to order 2 more seasons. By the time, when we got to Bob's Yellow, it was no longer, we're no longer saying, well, so long, Tails, nice to know you. We were now kind of celebrating. We were going to be going on for a while. And so that episode just got bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, the original idea for Yellow, among the movies that Bob Zemeckis loved when he was a film school student at USC, was Stanley Kubrick's Paths of Glory. It's a World War One movie starring Kirk Douglas. And the comic book that Bob had found, Yellow, was a World War One story. And what Bob wanted to do was pay homage to one of his favorite movies and one of his favorite actors. The thing was that he wanted to get Kirk Douglas to be in this episode. Now, the script that they had written before I got there by these two feature writers was crap. It was, they thought, oh, it's a comic book. I can write, monodimensional. And no. You got to make the characters work if the ending is going to work. And so, since that was my job on the show to rewrite all the scripts to get them right, Bob turned to me. He said, "I need you to get Kirk Douglas for me. Can you get Kirk Douglas for me?" And so that was my assignment, to rewrite the script good enough so that Kirk would do the show. And I did, and he did. And I can tell you that working with Bob Zemeckis was always such a pleasure. Everything I know about the art of collaborating, I learned at that man's feet. He truly knows how to get the very best out of everyone he works with. By contrast, one of my other executive producers, the executive producer who has spent most of the time of all the executive producers, he was the one that I saw most and was mostly involved with this, and that was Joel Silver. And you'll hear lots more about Joel as we go along. Joel, in addition to producing the movies that I mentioned, a larger than life character. There are a lot of movies that have characters and movie producer characters based on Joel Silver. You remember the beginning of Roger Rabbit?
Yes.
Okay. Roger's on the set of a movie he's shooting, and the director screams at him. That screaming director is Joel Silver, playing Joel Silver. Yes, it's Joel Silver playing, in essence, Joel Silver. And it's Bob, because Joel is Bob's friend, and so it's an inside Hollywood joke. But it's Joel Silver directing Roger Rabbit. And if you want to know what Joel is like, that's Joel. That's Joel playing Joel. He's a screamer. He's one of the biggest screamers in town. But in his day, a talented producer, although problematic. But so working with Bob was great. Doing Crypt was great. And hey, turning the show around suddenly, oh gosh, the Crypt Keeper was getting advertising interest. We did Budweiser promotions, and Universal Pictures said, hey, we'd like you to do 3 Tales from the Crypt movies for us. You're an anthology. They all should be completely different. We said, great. And so we went to work making the first Tales from the Crypt feature. For a little while, we wanted to do Quentin Tarantino's Dusk Till Dawn, but we couldn't make a deal with Quentin. That in the end, there was a script that we all settled on called Demon Knight that turned out well. My partner Gil was supposed to direct it, but we're not horror guys. And we were very much afraid of getting completely pigeonholed by the town, which is a very easy thing to happen. And so the, the feature that Gil was going to direct, that I was going to write, that we were going to write together, we wanted it to be something different. And so everyone wanted they wanted Demon Knight, which is a monster movie. We said, all right, we'll write and Gil will direct the second one. And we went to work, and Demon Knight turned out great. Ernest Dickerson is the director, did a wonderful job. Spike Lee's director of photography over, of course, many great movies. A great cast in Demon Knight. Billy Zane is the villain, of course. Jada Pinkett and Bill Sadler are the heroes. It's got a wonderful cast. It's a terrific movie. It really is. For the second movie, Gil and I developed a project that was quite different. It was called Dead Easy, and it was a taut psychological thriller about a recovered memory. It took place in the swamps outside of New Orleans. It had a fantastic villain, this Harlequin character, great franchise-worthy character. Universal Pictures, our studio, must have been happy because we were spending their money. We were casting. We had a young unknown actress named Selma Hayek cast to play the female lead. And we spent the better part of 6 months in New Orleans, scouting, prepping, finding locations, and getting ready to go. We were in New Orleans 3 weeks before the start of principal photography when Universal called us on the phone and said, stop, come home. You're not making that movie. You're going to make something else. And so bewildered, we got on an airplane, and we flew back to Los Angeles. And when we got there, Universal stuck a script under our nose. Bordello of Blood was the title. They said, you're going to make this instead. And by the way, your release date hasn't changed. You still start in 3 weeks. Get to work rewriting this thing, guys. Now, where did Bordello of Blood come from? Well, at about this same time, a new studio called DreamWorks had come into being. DreamWorks was Steven Spielberg leaving his deal, not the lot, but his deal at Universal and becoming a studio. And as he became a studio, he had to make talent deals with other talents to come and make movies with us. And among the other talent that Universal was desperately afraid of losing was one of my executive producers, Bob Zemeckis, who was based at Universal. Universal went to Bob and said, Bob, obviously he stayed, so the deal must have worked out. I don't know any of the deal. I know one deal point. I know this deal point for a fact. Universal Pictures agreed to buy the first student script that Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gale, his writing partner, these are the future Back to the Future writers, the first script they ever wrote while they were students, film school students at USC, this thing called Bordello of Blood, for $500,000. It was just a way to structure a deal to put money in Bob's pocket. No one was thinking about making this student movie. But then Universal sat there thinking, we're just going to eat $500,000. Wait a minute. Bob's about to executive produce this other horror movie, this Dead Easy thing. We spent, what, $50,000 on that script? Fuck that. Take it out of their budget. Guys, you're making Bordello of Blood and said, hey, look, it's got Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gale's name on it. That's bigger than Alan Katz and Gil Adler's name, right? And so for that rather cynical reason, we went from making a movie that the entire creative team that had made Tales from the Crypt had spent 18 months on, that we were all devoted to. It, for all of us, it represented a chance to show the team that we were, hey, look how multi-talented we are. We can do more than one thing. To go from a project we were all heavily invested in to go make a student movie because of a deal point? Well, if you set out to make a movie for all those wrong reasons, do not be surprised when every day on that movie is stupider than the day before it, which is exactly what happened. Once we set off down that road, everyone seemed to lose their minds. And we went from being a creative unit that made a great show to a creative unit that just didn't know how to make anything. Rewriting the script was deeply problematic because, all right, the main character is a small town detective. Now, ask yourself, how much business can a detective really do in a small town? Not enough to be a small town detective. That's a non sequitur. That's the kind of thing that, I don't know, film school students might come up with because they're film school students. They have not lived in the real world enough to ask a question like that. And so our main character is a person who, or as I go to write the character and I try to justify what the character does and what the character thinks, what the character even says, where's he come from? What was his background that made him an impossible thing? It doesn't exist. And so you can't write with any, there's no meat on them bones.
Hmm.
And when the actors ask you, well, why am I saying this? Why am I doing this? What the hell am I supposed to say to them? It was an impossible task to rewrite the script, but that's what we had to do because now we're going to have to hire actors, actual professional SAG actors to be in this movie. We had wanted Danny Baldwin to play this part, and we had Danny Baldwin. I think Danny would have done it. But for some reason, my executive producer, Joel Silver, decided that he was going to cast our three leads. And instead of Danny Baldwin, he cast Dennis Miller. And to this day, I cannot tell you why he cast Dennis Miller. I don't know. Our audience was there for special effects makeup. Dennis Miller had a rather political HBO show at the time, rather esoteric. Our audience didn't give a fuck about Dennis Miller. Dennis did not want to do the movie like everyone else, but he didn't want to do the movie. And so he said, all right, I'll do it for $1 million, figuring nobody would pay him $1 million. But Joel said yes. Now, we looked at his quote. At that point, Dennis had done a couple of features, small roles for scale. Why were we paying this actor $1 million? I didn't have $1 million in the budget. We were a $12 million movie. I had $500,000 in the budget for that character. We went to Universal. We said, can Gil help us in breakage? And they said, we don't know why you're casting Dennis Miller. We think that's stupid. No, you can't have any money. And so we took the extra $500,000 out of the budget. All of our money was in special effects makeup, the thing our audience was there to see. We took it out of the special, out of that budget, out of the thing our audience was there to see, to pay an actor they didn't give a fuck. What kind of creative decision making is this? This is nuts. We wanted a woman named Bridget Wilson to play the female lead. Joel wanted Erica Eleniak because he thought he could have an affair with her. But she was in a long-term relationship. It was never going to happen. It was not even a remote possibility. And just after she said yes to working for us, yes to appearing in a movie called Bordello of Blood, she decided she didn't want to be that kind of actress appearing in this kind of movie anymore. So she said yes. Now, Gil is, whether he's producing or whether he's directing and producing, he's got an interesting a habit, which is a great habit. He likes to start shooting on a Thursday. So you shoot Thursday, Friday. If you've bumped into massive problems that need rewriting or a production issue, you've got the weekend to solve it or begin to solve it. So when you hit the ground Monday for your first full week, if there are any problems, you've dealt with them, or you know what they are and you're on your way to fixing them, and things will run a lot more smoothly. So we had started shooting in Vancouver on a Thursday, the bar scenes with the Canadian actors. Saturday, I'm expecting Erica Eleniak to be on an airplane to be there settling in on Sunday, to be in wardrobe on Monday, to work on Tuesday. But on Saturday, I get a call from her manager telling me that she's not going to get on an airplane until the script is rewritten because she doesn't want to be that kind of actress in this kind of movie anymore. The part was written as a former porn actress, but she didn't want to be a former porn actress. Well, I can't really rewrite the script too much because plot points rest on that. The Dennis's character, there are things that rely on the fact that she was that thing. If she's not that thing, if she's she plays a church secretary who used to be a porn star who's trying to protect her past. If she's always been a church secretary, well, that kind of kills a lot of things. So I end up negotiating with her manager, who, by the way, was a former porn actor, who was entirely sympathetic to my problem that his client was causing me. That, all right, she was a former overweight porn actress. She wasn't called Chesty O'Toole, she was called Chubby O'Toole, and was unrecognizable. And for some reason, that was okay. I don't know why that was better, but for some reason, and so the rest of the weekend, I feverishly rewrote the script to accommodate my actress who did not want to be there. Uh, the villain of the piece, the most important character in the whole movie. Now, to play Lilith, the villain, we wanted Robin Givens. And I think Robin would have given us a great performance with lots of layers. But at the time that we were making Bordello with Blood in Vancouver, and I'll digress for a moment to explain why we went to Vancouver, there was no reason to shoot that movie in Vancouver. When we went back to Los Angeles to feverishly get started, we bumped into another problem. Joel, my executive producer, was always at war with the IA, the union that represented our crew. And sometimes Joel was up and the union was down, and sometimes the union was up and Joel was down. Well, the union had shut down a TV movie we had done that we had done for Fox a little while before. And so Joel's attitude was, fuck me, no, fuck you. And so rather than shoot the movie in Los Angeles with our crew, we went to Vancouver where our crew could not follow. We did not go to Vancouver because there was something in Vancouver that our movie needed. We went to Vancouver to avoid the union. That was going to bite us in the ass later. We'll come to that. So we were making our movie in Vancouver. Meanwhile, my executive producers, Joel, and actually Dick Donner, since he was directing a movie called Assassins, which was shooting in Seattle, and that starred Antonio Banderas and Sylvester Stallone. Now, at the time, Stallone was engaged to a supermodel named Angie Everhart. And one day on the set of Assassins, Sylvester Stallone approached Joel Silver and he said, "Hey, Joel, here you're going to be making a movie in Vancouver. Why don't you put my girlfriend Angie in your movie? That way we could visit each other across the border." And Joel, instead of being a responsible executive producer and saying, "That's a great idea, Sly, but let me check with the guys to make sure it's okay with them," he said, "That's a great idea, Sly." Period. And he obligated our movie to hire as the most important character the girlfriend of an actress on another set, not because she would be good for our movie, but to make the actor on that other movie set happy. These are the kind of dumb fucking decisions. I mean, now it would turn out at the end of the day that Stallone had an ulterior motive. He ultimately wanted to use our movie as a consolation prize for when he broke up with Angie, which he did 2/3 of the way through our movie. Now, Angie's a lovely person. She's terrific, but she was at a terrible disadvantage. One, because she was an inexperienced performer. She was not an actress. She was not trained as an actress, but an inexperienced performer to play a part of that kind. Now, I've hired a lot of actors. I can tell you, the last thing I ever wanted any of the actors I ever hired to do was act. Holy shit, don't do that, not in front of the camera. If you're in the theater, yeah, you got to act because the people in the last row got to see and hear you, you got to act. But the camera's right in your face, and the camera, like the microphone for podcasters, is a bullshit detector. And if you act, it will see you acting. I hired actors to be themselves, as emotionally naked and honest as they can be at key moments. Give them a different name, put some words in their mouth, but at those key moments, like a light switch, I don't need them acting those emotions. I need them to be in it completely. And that's what the audience sees, gets. Billy Zane in the first Crypt movie, Demon Knight, is a wonderful villain. Billy's a great villain in Titanic. Now, the thing about Billy is that to get to those dark parts, he ain't acting. There's a shit ton of darkness inside of Billy. And yeah, he's a bit egomaniacal. Hey, that's part of his skill set. So when he is in these playing these parts, he's not acting, he's being. Angie, unfortunately for her, even if she was a trained actress, because she's a lovely person, there's nothing dark or villainous dark inside her. And so in our movie, all those scenes where she had to play something villainous and dark, rather than tapping into something inside her, which did not exist, she had to act. And not being a trained actress, it's kind of there for you to see it. This is not a knock on Angie whatsoever. This was a ludicrous ask by professional movie makers of a person who they all knew, Stallone included. She did not have the chops for this. None of those people gave a fuck. They did. This was one more cynical decision. Making Bordello of Blood, it went from bad to worse. And among the problems that we created for ourselves in being in Vancouver, we were shooting the movie in July. Now, with horror movies, your stock and trade is night, darkness. When you are in Vancouver in July, one of the things they don't have a whole lot of in July is darkness, night, because the sun sets pretty close around midnight is when the last traces of light leave the sky. So now it looks like it's night to the camera. First trace of light around 4 a.m. So you got 4 hours of shootable dark in filmmaking world's a 13-hour day. What kind of a stupid decision was that? And yet that's what we did to ourselves. And we had one night to shoot the climax of the movie, and we had set it in a glass church. We set ourselves up for failure 1,000 different ways. Things happened on that movie set that were so incredibly stupid. Now, as I said, Stallone eventually broke up with Angie. Now, we knew he was fucking around with her on his set because early on, in the first couple of weeks, really the point of having Angie, of course, was they could visit each other across the border from movie set to movie set. And so our production office in Vancouver would arrange with the Assassins production office in Seattle to get Angie from point A to point B and back, because we needed to make sure that she was back on our set in time to work. And so for the first 2 weekends, that's what happened. And then as the third weekend drew near, the Assassins office called our production office and said, "Can you hold Angie for the weekend?" Hold her to do what? Her homework? He said, "No." And stories began to come from the Assassins office to the Bordello office about shit that Sylvester Stallone was doing. And one particular story, I had never heard this story before, and Stallone has never denied that this story is true. The only question has ever been on what set did it actually take place. And I would tell you it must have been Assassins, because I didn't hear the story before that ever. And the first time that I did ever hear it was from my production office in Vancouver, who'd heard it from the production office in Seattle. Stallone finishes a scene and heads back to his trailer, unaware of the fact that his wireless lavalier mic is still broadcasting to the sound card. A young woman is waiting for him in his trailer, and she proceeds to give him a blowjob. Now, apparently Sly is rather particular about how he likes his hummers. And so now people are gathering around the sound card as they hear Stallone going, "Yeah, that's right, stroke the shaft, cup the ball. Yeah, cup the ball, stroke the shaft." The next day, Stallone shows up on the set. The whole crew are wearing T-shirts that say, "Stroke the shaft, cup the balls." Like I said, Stallone has never denied the story. I think he's rather proud of it, in fact. I bet he still has his shirt. It's only been what set, and I would tell you it was the set of Assassins. So when we went home from Vancouver when we did not have a completed movie, we had to do a bunch of reshoots in Los Angeles. We still could have made our release date, but by then Universal had completely thrown up its hands. They didn't care. They did not give a. They didn't. So we didn't make our Halloween release date, and they dropped us the following August in the doldrums. So we really didn't open. By the time the movie opened, Gil Adler and I, my partner of 10 years, my best friend of a decade, we were no longer on speaking terms. And we did not speak to each other again for 25 years. The animosity was that nasty. That kind of, the whole Bordello of Blood experience, that just screwed up my life completely because, we'll get to it. I was not a strong producer on it. I was making a movie I didn't want to make. I didn't care about that movie. I wanted to make it dead easy.
Was there ever a point during the movie that you guys thought like you could just see the writing on the wall when it was being created?
No, because we still had another season of Tales from the Crypt to do, which we did. We shot the last season of Tales from the Crypt in London, which was fun in some ways, but another kind of a disaster because the way that we made Tales from the Crypt in Los Angeles didn't translate well to making it in London. Just a very, very different because of how you produce things there, of how you don't build sets, very many sets there. The kind of sets for a TV series, you have locations. Hey, you want a castle? Take your pick. Every kind of thing you want, you can find there. So our whole model just really did not work there. We came home from London. We were supposed to, that was the end of Crypt. We were beginning to work on a science fiction series that was going to replace Crypt. It ultimately became Perversions of Science. But while we were negotiating to make that, Joel Silver decided he didn't want me on it. And so I got fired off of whatever Perversions became. And I thought Gil was going to walk with me because we were partners, we were friends, and he didn't. And I had two great seasons. After a couple of years, I ended up doing two really lovely seasons on The Outer Limits. I worked on a couple other projects, but really for the most part, I began a 2-decade-long descent into a darkening depression and a writer's block I didn't even know I was in. Getting onto the showbiz mountain, the movie, TV, the Hollywood mountain, it's so hard. But once you're there, yeah, you really feel kind of special. And when you get thrown off the mountain and everyone you know is still on the mountain, it's horrible. It just, you feel like you're completely cut off from everything you are. Now, I had another problem I was dealing with. I turned out I was keeping a secret from myself, which I ended up keeping 45 years. Now, we'll get to that in a little very shortly, but in this 20-year period, while I wrote and I tried to get things going and came close on a couple things, but nothing ever came apart. The thing that I dedicated most of my life to for the next 2 decades was raising my 2 kids. And I really became the full-time dad. Since I couldn't get work doing the thing I wanted, I kind of floundered. My wife had a ballet school, and that helped keep the lights on at home, but I lost touch with me, and I floundered. But raising my kids was awesome. And 3 days before Christmas 2016, I came within literal inches of killing myself. And I knew I was in a really dark place, and I knew I needed a mood stabilizer. My dad was a surgeon. I grew up in the medical profession, and I knew that my GP had no background in mood stabilizers, the kind of medications I need. The last pharmaceutical rep who walked through his office probably said, "Hey, you got any depressed patients? Give them some of this. This is what we make. See if it helps." Well, I knew already that these are problematic medications anyway. And even under the best of circumstances, it's a lab experiment. You're going to start taking one at 6 to 8 weeks before you know whether it's even going to work for you. And I did not want to walk into my GP's office and be a complete lab experiment with none of the boxes ticked off. I had done my own research, and now knowing that I had gotten to a place, I had crossed the line where I was, okay, angry enough at myself where I could do something fatally stupid. I drove right to my GP's office and I said, look, here's what I just did. Here's the medication that I've done my research on. Would you please write this prescription for me? And he whipped out his smartphone. He looked it up. He said, yeah, okay, that makes sense. And he wrote the prescription, picked it up, went home, told my family what I was going to do. And I took the first dose. And 36 hours, I got so lucky because within 36 hours, at the minimal dose, I leveled. I felt the medication put the darkness in a cage where I could still see that it's there, but it couldn't get at me. It could reach at me through the bars of its cage, but it couldn't get me anymore. And because it couldn't get me, I could finally confess the secret that I had been keeping from myself for 45 years. That when I was 14, I was sexually molested twice by the religious director at the synagogue where my family belonged outside of Baltimore. Now, the first time is bad, but it's the second time that sets the hook, because the second time happened because I didn't say anything the first time. And it's in the middle of the second time, I know what my mind did. I said to myself, this is your fault. You did this. This is all your fault. Now, that was not true. It was not 14-year-old me's fault that an adult was using me as a sex toy. But the template had been created and set. And going forward, it was always going to be my fault, whether it was or not. And when you approach the world like that and you take the blame for things which you shouldn't take the blame for, when you go to try to solve those problems, you're not going to solve them. You're going to solve the wrong problems always. And so it never works for anybody. As you go through adulthood, adult problems become larger and larger and larger. Yeah, let's solve anything. But when I finally could deal with my secret and I confronted it, and that was a hard weekend when I finally confessed the truth to myself. But it's so true what they say. The truth set me free. I finally was able to give the 14-year-old me the hug he had wanted ever since, and to be alleviated, to be liberated. It's not your responsibility. You did not do this to you. Well, from a writing perspective, hey, if you can't tell your own story to yourself, can you really tell anyone else's story? No, you can't. And the process of telling myself the truth, I went from being, all right, I'll pat myself on the back, a really good writer, to being a storyteller. And that has made all the difference in my life. During the pandemic, a Tales from the Crypt fan group, 3 dads from different parts of the country got together and they created a podcast called Dads from the Crypt. And they reviewed all the episodes of Tales from the Crypt and gave parenting advice. One day, one of the dads, Jason Stein, reached out to me. He said, hey, we're going to be reviewing one of the episodes you wrote. You want to sit in with us? And I said, well, that sounds like fun. And so I did. And a few weeks later, Jason reached out to me again. He said, hey, we're going to be reviewing Bordello of Blood. You want to sit in with us? And I said, Jason, the story of the making of Bordello of Blood is not a half an hour conversation with you guys. It's a podcast unto itself. And that was the impetus from my first podcast, the How Not to Make a Movie podcast, The Making of Bordello of Blood. And that first season, Entertainment Weekly called it the best film podcast of 2022, in part because it was so honest. Now, in order to make the podcast and telling the story as honestly as possible was now incredibly important, because the truth set me free. There were 3 people that I needed to take to task in this story. One was Dennis Miller, because I paid you $1 million, man. You don't have to be an asshole every fucking day. 2, Sylvester Stallone, because because of what he did, but also because we knew until he broke up with Angie at 2/3 of the way through the movie and turned her into a mess, we were aware of the fact that he was cheating. And so we were keeping his secret for him. He made us co-conspirators in the terrible thing he was doing to this very nice person. And I will resent that to the grave. And for that, I needed to call him out, which I did. The third person I needed to take to task was me. Because yeah, I didn't want to make that movie, but you still took the money, wasn't much money, but you still took the money as producer. Do the job. Do the job. And so I needed to confess. But in order to tell the story with balls to the wall, honestly, I was going to have to, Gil Adler was going to have to tell the story with me. So I had to reach out to Gil, and we talked, and I said, here's what I want to do. I want to tell the story of the making of Bordello Blood, and I want to talk about what happened afterwards, including our breakup and all the recriminations and all that shit. And I said, I don't want to talk about it beforehand. I want to have that conversation live on mic for the podcast. Are you in? And he hemmed and he hawed and he said, okay, I'll do it. And it was cathartic. First of all, we became friends again. We became creative partners. We're working on a couple of things, but we re-entered each other's lives, and that was wonderful in telling the story. Now, making Bordello, making the How Not to Make a Movie podcast, and in telling the story of the making, I found I loved the podcasting medium. And a friend from school approached me. He wanted to, something that actually, a true story, something that happened to him. He wanted to turn it into a TV series. Now, to take any idea and take it from my head, let's say, and turn it into a movie or TV series, let's say a TV series. To write the script, that takes years, actually, to get a script right. The average is 10 years. The scripts that it takes people to get them, wow. It's 10 years. But let's say, you're super quick. You got it done in 3 years. That's 3 years. Okay. Now you got your script ready. Well, it's a TV series. You can't just sell the script. That's just season 1, episode 1. What happens episode 2, 3, 4, 5? What's the rest of the season? Season 1. What happens in seasons 2, 3, and 4? What are these larger story arcs? Who are all these characters? What are the tones? You got to fill in all those blanks for the people in the executive suites who have no imagination. If they had imaginations, they'd be doing what the creatives are doing. That's why they sit in the executive suites doing what they do. And so you got to tell them everything. Well, Bibles don't write themselves, and they don't write themselves quickly. That's another year. And hey, because you're getting into the nitty gritty of the story, that's going to impact your first episode. And there's going to be a lot of back and forth where you now have to rewrite things here. And then, because I changed this here, then I got to revise the Bible. Let's be, just for fun's sake, let's say you could do that in a year. Good luck to you. But okay, let's say now you're 4 years in. And before you, in order to get, the goal is to get an executive. There are just a handful of executives. All this work is going to go to now, to get them to read. And just to induce these monkeys to read, you have to create a pitch deck. It's a PowerPoint presentation, a few scattered words and images, what's it about? Give me a taste. Just to induce them to fucking read. And if they say yes to read, that's just the top of the meat grinder. My God, then there is still development process. God, there are still thousands of ways and assholes standing in your way at any one point. Any one of those assholes can kill your project dead just because they're an asshole. God, who knows what kind of sausage is going to come out the other end of this thing? Years. And hey, the first thing they're going to make you do, if they say, hey, yeah, okay, we like this, let's develop it, before money changes hands, you, the creative, you, the writer, will have to sign what's called a certificate of authorship. Mandatory. And it has to do with the fact, the way that film is distributed around the world. If any one person could say, hey, I'm not giving you the rights to that, the whole movie dies. So for movie distribution to work, everyone has really to give up their rights completely in perpetuity throughout the known universe. And so this idea that you've worked on for all these years, in order to get paid, you have to give up all the rights forever. You don't own nothing. And hey, one of the first things they're going to start thinking about doing is firing your ass and hiring a real writer. So my friend, now we're back to my friend. He approached me and said, I've got this thing that happened to me. I want to turn it into a TV series. I said, no, you don't. To take the same idea and turn it into a podcast. Well, hey, podcasting, I can write the story, I can produce the story, I can distribute the finished story, I can monetize the story, and I can collect all the money stream all by myself, and I still own the thing. I haven't surrendered anything. Why would I? And hey, I could still sell it at the end of the day. If it make a great movie or TV series, I can still sell it. And I've told the story the way I want to. So I said to my friend, no, you don't want to do this. You want to do it as a podcast. That way, you can tell the whole story exactly the way we need to tell it. And that became my first story podcast, The Donor and DNA Horror Story. My friend Hal worked his way through medical school in the mid-90s as an anonymous sperm donor. Jump forward 27 years, he was a successful radiologist. He joined 23andMe, curious about his health genes. Never occurred to him the ramifications of adding his DNA to a growing DNA database. That's what 23andMe and Ancestry are. He lost his donor anonymity. Suddenly, 7 total strangers found Daddy, except 6 of them had no idea their actual biological father was Hal, a sperm donor. I got a taste for fucked up stories, yeah? I've never heard a story this fucked up, because that's just the tip of the fucked up iceberg. Oh, it is deeply fucked up. But what a story. And telling Hal's story, well, yeah, you could tell every last bit of it honest, with total honesty, breathtaking honesty. Well, I found that exhilarating. And in order to tell Hal's story, I had to learn about the donor conceived community, the community of people who are learning that they're donor conceived from like 23andMe, or who have known that they're donor conceived and know that they have all kinds of half donor conceived siblings out there. The donor conceived world, they refer to their donor conceived siblings, some of them, as dibblings. And in order to do the research, a woman named Donna Hall gave me lots of great background. Donna learned at 40 that she was donor conceived. When Donna told me her story outside of that, which is crazy enough, I said, holy shit, Donna, you're a podcast unto yourself. And she said, yeah, I know, I've been trying to make one. But Donna had an amazing story, and she was proof of great stories have to be told the right way to become great stories. And Donna's story, mind-blowing. Donna grew up in the mid-90s in a lower tier crime family outside of Philadelphia. Now, the Halls weren't the Corleones from the Godfather movies, but they made national headlines. Donna's mom, Phyllis, maybe the worst mom ever, spent 6 months in prison for child endangerment. Her stepdad, John Hall, a true criminal mastermind, he was the Philadelphia Police Department's favorite snitch. He put more than 25 people behind bars based on bullshit confessions he concocted to mitigate his own considerable legal jeopardy. Among the people that John Hall put in prison was his own stepson, Herb, who spent 18 months in prison awaiting trial for a murder he did not commit. Among the other people John Hall put into prison was a man named Walter Ogrod, who spent 24 years on death row in Pennsylvania because of a bullshit John Hall confession. Walter, for a murder that Walter had nothing to do with. When Pennsylvania finally let Walter Ogrod out, they gave $9.1 million to make up for their mistake. The last prisoner of a John Hall confession was just released this year. A man named David Dixon was released in Pennsylvania. John Hall died 20 years ago. There was a bullshit confession that had David Dixon on a life term in Pennsylvania. John Hall, like I said, was a criminal mastermind. Donna described what it was like in her podcast. Well, her story is, it's what it's like growing up in a family where literally every single day, one or more of the adults is behaving like a criminal. Telling her story, I discovered I had become the thing I always wanted to be when I grew up, which is a podcaster. I loved telling her story in this medium. Our voices getting, when she found her voice, which was very quickly in her relationship with the microphone, you can't see the microphone as a piece of equipment. You've got to see the microphone as an extension of your vocal cords. You're not talking at it. You are speaking through it. And once you realize this is an extension of you, as all my podcasters, I try to get them to do, Donna is an exquisite, well, she was an exquisite storyteller to begin with, but she's an exquisite podcaster because, well, first, she's got a vivacious personality. Her story is a trip to safety and empowerment. And that podcast is called The Hall Closet. And like I said, telling that story, I realized this is all I want to do. And I committed myself. My company, Costard and Touchstone, this is what we do. We make podcasts. It's called Costard and Touchstone. During my brief acting career, I performed in 2 Shakespearean plays. I performed the part of Costard in Love's Labour's Lost, and I performed the part of Touchstone in As You Like It. Both are Shakespearean wise fools who speak truth to power. And that's what my company, Costard and Touchstone, does. We are a wise fool speaking truth to power. Suddenly, I found myself, right now, I've got 6 podcasts out in the world and another dozen on the way. Among the other podcasts I've got coming, well, one that's out right now. I'm going to get there's a Sage Wellness Within, which I'm doing with a wonderful Chinese medicine practitioner named Dr. Andrea Thorpe. And that's about Chinese medicine. That's a terrific podcast. She's a wonderful, great Chinese, a great healer, but also a terrific podcaster. There's also Just the Photographer with David Swanson. David is a Pulitzer Prize winning photojournalist. He took one of the iconic 9/11 photos of the first responders down in the pit. He has covered war zones from Bosnia to Afghanistan to Iraq, where he was shot and wounded. He's covered natural disasters, Katrina, earthquakes in Haiti. Amazing photos. And the photos can tell you what it looked like standing in those dangerous places. They can't tell you what it felt like. And that's what the podcast does. It tells the stories his photos can't. And so it takes you inside his head, his world, and really puts you in those places. That's why I love this medium for storytelling. The last one I'll tell you about, which is just about to drop, I'm super, super, super excited about this one. It's called John Kiriaku's Dead Drop. John Kiriakou is one of the best known spies in the world. During the War on Terror, we went after Al-Qaeda's leadership. And John Kiriakou, we captured a man who we thought was Al-Qaeda's number 3, a man named Abu Zubaydah in Pakistan. And John Kiriakou led that mission. And for the first 60 hours that we held Abu Zubaydah, John Kiriakou was his handler and his interrogator. They moved Abu Zubaydah on to other places. He ended up at a couple of black sites. Later, John learned that, even though we learned that Abu Zubaydah was not the number 3 at Al-Qaeda, he was a prince, but he wasn't the number 3 at Al-Qaeda. He gave us lots of very good actionable intelligence. Despite those facts, we waterboarded him 83 times. And when John learned that we had a torture program, an active torture program, he ratted it out to a journalist and spent 23 months in federal prison for doing it. John's podcast, John Kiriaku's Dead Drop, What Makes a Spy Tick, is exactly that. It's how to be a spy, how not to be a spy. But it's John's very intimate, granular story of how he came to be a spy, how he came to be that spy. That's amazing. Awesome. What's really exciting is that he will be appearing on Joe Rogan, the Joe Rogan Experience, on October 10th, to talk about what he's done, but also talk about that podcast.
Nice. That's
Holy
awesome.
fucking cow. So now I have I have, like I said, I've become the thing I always wanted to be when I grew up, and I could not be happier. I walk around in a perpetual state of bliss. It ain't the mood stabilizer. That just keeps the darkness in a box. I have a wonderful therapist who, that's perspective. I smoke copious amounts of THC. I'm a wake and bake kind of a guy. If I could bake before I waked, I would do that too, but I can't. Um, no, my company's on a mission to make the world a better place through storytelling.
Love that.
That's what we're doing. Now, in the first season of the How Not to Make a Movie podcast, telling the story of Bordello of Blood, there was a coda to the story. Now, working for Joel Silver in a way kind of destroyed me. But hey, I ended up being a dad. And hey, as I don't think I'm telling you anything that you don't already know, that's the best gig I ever had in my entire life. My two kids, best
Very
thing
true.
I will ever create, bar none. Forget about it. I when I was a full-time dad with young kids, I threw myself at it completely, and I was, very much a full-time dad. When my son got into sports, I coached. I coached basketball. I coached soccer. In fact, I didn't just coach the team. We started a whole club with a bunch of teams. We couldn't do anything small. And when Tristan wanted to play Ultimate, I coached Ultimate. And hey, among the people I coached was Billie Eilish, was in our league, and her brother, and her brother, name might just went up. Anyway, one day we had, if ultimate frisbee, you play without a referee, it's self officiated. There are some rules, but one day there was an argument about the rules, and so when I got home, I looked up the rules, and then I discovered something quite horrifying. The name of the man who created ultimate frisbee. His name is Joel Silver.
Stop it. Seriously.
Seriously. It was Joel Silver. It was Joel Silver.
Wow.
Joel Silver. So on that day when I discovered it, I thought, oh, that motherfucker is hunting me. Because I was miles from the mountain. There was no way I was ever going to get back on the mountain. And I bumped into Joel Silver in a place I did not expect to bump into him. Now yeah. So that is my story of showbiz and dadding.
That's I only asked you two questions this entire thing. One was, let's hear your origin story. And my God, sir, that is one hell of an origin story there.
Well,
that is,
the origin didn't stop at origin. It continued. Well, because the
no,
origin story is kind of still continuing. I'm still every day. It's like an origin story in it.
I love that. I love that. And I legitimately, when I came to do this episode, I had a mentality, I had a concept idea of what we were getting into and kind of talking about. And the fact that you've been able to open up not only on your podcasts and on your shows and discovering yourself, and with being able to do all these other projects, and being able to talk to my audience about it, it's very humbling. I'm very appreciative, and it's amazing. It truly is. To see, you have seen the good, the bad. You've seen how the sausage is made when it comes to Hollywood in more than one way.
I've been turned into the sausage. That's what
And
happens. You get ground down and out, man.
I believe that 100%. And you've been, the fact that you were able to come out of, let's be honest here, there is a lot of dark areas of Hollywood, and you were able to kiss them even slightly, and to come out as good as you have. Like, sir, I commend you on that.
Thank you.
It is amazing. And
I did get lucky, but among the other projects I'm working on, there's a book that's going to come early next year. It's called How to Live Bullshit Free: A Practical Guide to Not Killing Yourself.
I love that.
And it really is, and that will tell the story of how the fact that I came within inches of killing myself. If I had it in my head that my family would be better off without me because I was in such a dark space. Hey, there was insurance money that would eventually make everybody feel all right. Well, that was all bullshit. And after the fact, it occurred to me that I'd come within literal inches of bullshitting myself to death, which I thought was hilarious. But the more that I thought about it, the more that I realized it was the literal truth. It was bullshit. The 14-year-old me was responsible for what an adult did to me. That was bullshit. And so bullshit was the thing that literally had haunted me, had separated me from me. And that was really the most devastating thing of all. If you can't have a relationship with yourself, you can't have a relationship with anybody. And that's really how I walked through my life. I had relationships, but if you didn't know my secret, you didn't know me, and nobody knew my secret, including me. So really, everybody, me included, was always kept at a distance. I didn't even know I was doing it, but I was doing it in the aftermath of all of that. The thing that, oh gosh, I treasure more than anything is the relationships with myself. And the connection to me is what allows me to connect with everybody else. And I feel this incredible connection to the rest of the world and telling its stories, telling its story. That is my mission. The truth set me free. I know the truth will set everyone else free. And all you got to do is just sit down and tell your story honestly.
I love that. You know what? I couldn't think of a better spot to wrap up this episode. Sir, where can the good people out there in Nerd Nation find you?
Our website, costardandtouchstone.com, HTTPS, colon, // if you feel, but if you just Costard and Touchstone Production, Costard and Touchstone, oh, you'll find us. We costardandtouchstone.com. You can link to all of our different podcasts. And there's the coming podcasts are also there. That's the ideal place. But wherever you listen to podcasts, the How Not to Make a Movie podcast is everywhere. The Donor, a DNA horror story, is everywhere. The Hall Closet is everywhere. Sage Wellness Within is everywhere. Just the Photographer with David Swanson is everywhere. And John Kiriaku's Dead Drop is that'll start dropping October 2nd. And then every single week, holy cow, we're in active production on that podcast this week. I've been recording with John. Oh my God, the story. This guy tells stories. The people in his stories. Well, I was working with Bill Clinton on this thing, and like what? The most remarkable stories to be sitting in a room with this guy while he is telling you what he did. And he's a very heroic man and very unassuming. The loveliest, nicest guy. What a wonderful person just to sit in a room and spend time with. How lucky am I? But going to be a great podcast, an amazing podcast, an amazing story.
I cannot wait.
That's what I'm here to do.
Yeah, we'll definitely make sure to give them the love. We'll post up the links and everything.
Thank you.
Yeah. But again, thank you for
having me, man. I love the whole concept of dad nerds, man. Hey.
Yeah, no, it's great.
As soon as I saw that, I thought, all right, I'm in the tribe.
So let's go ahead and let's wrap this up on our side. As always, please like and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you are listening to us on Apple or Spotify, please remember to rate and review. We're also on Facebook and Instagram, so please like and follow us at DNA Pod or on our webpage, nerddnapod.com. I'm your host, Steve Pugh, and I have been joined by the legendary storytelling, the epic of all things fun over here, Sir Alan Katz. Sir, thank you so much again for being on the show. I would love to have you back on. I know there is so much more you can tell us over there. Obviously, you've got thousands of stories to tell.
Let's say this is the first of many conversations that you and I are going to have on this subject. Hey, man, Dad, we haven't talked about all the dad stuff that we could talk about, and there's all kinds of other stuff.
There is way too many stuff. There's way too much.
So no. This is, and again, we are fellow podcasters. So anytime you want to talk about anything, reach out to me, my man.
The feeling is mutual. Cool. So let's go ahead and let's wrap this up. Thank you and good night.